welcome. So again, we are welcoming four amazing artists today, and I'm gonna actually turn it off to them. Each artist, could you introduce yourself, introduce your pronouns, and give us a little bit of background about the type of work you do? We can start with Chantel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chantel Walker. My stage name is Grada Love. And by stage name, I mean spoken word poetry. I am a poet, a visual artist. Lately, my main medium with visual art is painting. I also sketch. And I am a co-founder for the DMV Renaissance Awards, which I'll probably speak mostly about. And I also have a podcast called Marrying the Unigod, which focuses on spirituality in young people of color, because I feel like we have Oprah Super Soul, which is like, older people, but I wanted to tap into what we're doing on our spiritual journeys at this age, in our 20s, early 20s to early 30s. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Let's go to Sherelle next.
I'm Sherelle Langine, and I am the art therapist at my sister's place. So my sister's place is the organization that you just saw the little video about, and that is where half of what everything we earn today is going. It is a domestic violence shelter, and I work with women who are fleeing domestic violence or human trafficking.
And Cheryl, you led us through that art project earlier today, which, I have to be honest, I'm someone who has to watch the whole project first, so I enjoyed watching it, but I will make it later. But thank you so much for
Amazing. I'm
leading us through
excited you're going to do that later on.
it. All right, we can go on to Xiomara next.
Hi there. I'm Xiomara Rivera, pronoun she, her. I am one of the original members of Cultura Planera. It's a nonprofit in the Maryland DMV area, and we dedicate ourselves to teaching and promoting traditional music from Puerto Rico, specifically bomba en plena. We've been doing that for the past 7 to 8 years, and I'm also one of the founders of Madre Tierra, which is a women's group who practices the same type of music, bomba en plena, all women in the DMV area.
And you also, I saw in your bio, you're working with The Well with Laura Bacon.
Yes.
Yeah,
The Well is a nonprofit as well, and it is in the Maryland area, specifically in Columbia, and it dedicates themselves to working with women of color in order to pursue their entrepreneur, their goals, whatever that may be, either financial, academic, whatever you need in order to achieve your goal as a woman of color in this world. It's seeking to kind of bridge that gap for those women.
yeah, awesome. I actually just got to do yoga with Laura this morning. That's why I wanted to bring that up. I love that program. I love what you guys are doing.
Amazing. They're doing amazing work. She just started a year ago, and what she's done in the past year is impressive. So thank
Yeah,
you
I'm
for.
excited. Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about it. And last but certainly not least, Sydney.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me on, guys. My name is Sydney Parker. I am also from the DMV area. I grew up as a dancer, started from the age of 5 being trained in ballet. And then as I grew up, I was trained in jazz, hip hop, kick, and danced all the way up and through to my college career at the University of Maryland on their dance team. From there, I had met my two co-founders of the business that I now am a founding member of, Aurora Tights. Aurora Tights is a business where we seek to create apparel for performers such as dancers, skaters, gymnasts, and cheer coming soon, where we are trying to make apparel that fits your perfect size, shape, and shade. We all grew up there, two ice skaters, I'm a dancer. We all grew up without having the proper mesh material, the proper tights that matched our shade. And as performers, your lines are incredibly important. And so we wanted to create not only a brand, but a space that performers could feel themselves being shown in the apparel that we make, as well as form a community around different ways that we can make these sports more inclusive, including raising money for some of our nonprofit partners too. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk more about all of that today and to be on a panel with all of you wonderful ladies.
Yeah. So I'm Angela. I'm a teacher in Howard County, Maryland. I taught elementary school for 4 years, general music and chorus, and then I switched to middle school. So I just finished my 5th year, so this will be my 10th year teaching in the DMV area. I grew up in Columbia, Maryland, and I live in Elkridge now. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you all. And I think back on my own education and my own experience being exposed to the arts, and I wonder how different it would have been had I had the women that in this conversation right now leading me instead of I know I had predominantly white women and white males leading me through it all. So I wonder how my perspective and how my artistic visions of my own would have changed or would have been different had I grown up with different leaders and more just representation of different races, different genders, different disability levels. So I wonder if you could each maybe speak about the work that you do and how your upbringing and your background helps inform the work that you do. And anyone can take it away.
I can start. So I am Puerto Rican, as I mentioned earlier. I was born in Puerto Rico, but I grew up in the diaspora. So I'm a military brat. I was born there, came here at the age of 2, and grew up in some very diverse spaces and some less diverse spaces. And so I definitely had a tricky time figuring out where I fit in to the narrative and what my specific story was. And so I got to the age of my mid 20s and I was trying to figure out who I was. And I didn't really identify with my own culture in a way that I felt that I needed to. I wasn't able to connect linguistically, culturally, in a way that I felt was necessary in order to understand who I was and how I wanted to move forward. So I ended up being a Spanish teacher because there's always that gap to be filled. And I found that I wanted to learn more about my own culture. And by doing that, I had the opportunity to actually go to New York, where one of my mentors was over there doing exactly that, teaching what it is to be a Puerto Rican in the diaspora, but also maintain roots linguistically, culturally, that make you feel as though you never left the island. And also feel the experience of being over here. So it's a yes and, not necessarily being sad about not being there, appreciating that I'm not there. I'm over here, I have a different experience. And so I learned more about this tradition. My dad was fully invested because he's always been a lover of bomba en plena music. We found a gap in this particular area, the DMV, of not just Puerto Ricans, but people who wanted a different experience when they shared with their families and their friends. And so there was definitely a lot of Puerto Ricans who came together, and we decided to start a nonprofit because of it. And that gave us the opportunity for me to continue learning about my culture, my heritage, my language, my everything, but also to kind of share that with other groups of people, other Puerto Ricans who are also in the diaspora, either recently or later on because of Hurricane Maria. You know, a lot of us had to come over here. And so we were able to provide that space for them. And I think that that was exactly what I needed in the past 7 to 8 years to get me to a place where I feel like I can connect with the island, with my language, with my culture, with my people in a way that's indicative to who I am. And later on, I was able to start a group with a women's group where we practice exactly that, which brought a whole new element to the experience, where we could practice in a space that was devoted to those traditions, but also focused on our needs and our experiences in these traditions. Right. So that's how it contributes to my identity in a nutshell.
No, I love that.
Okay, I can tap in next. I would say for me personally, as far as figuring out that I'm an artist, that I am going to pursue this as a career, because there's a difference between seeing yourself as an artist as a hobby, but to say, this is what I actually want to do. This is a part of my purpose and my calling. And if I don't do it, it's a problem. Like me and God, the universe, have a problem if I show up and I didn't do nothing about this. So I think mine was, going through life, always writing poetry since I was a kid, always drawing, painting. I was the kid with a piece of paper and a pen, no matter where we were. And I went to college and I studied journalism. And that is a big part of my life, which I didn't realize until recently, that degree was intentional, because I'm naturally curious. On my podcast, I'm always interviewing people and I want to hear more about their journeys. And within the first 2 years after graduating college, I remember crying in my apartment. It seemed like I had it all together. You got the job after college, you got the degree, I worked for an airline, I was traveling. I was like, oh, this must be it.
And you checked all the boxes.
Exactly. And it seemed like everything I should have been grateful for and just, kind of settled for and been like, okay, this is it. I'm good. I made it. But then I was crying in my closet. And I remember looking up and I had all these boxes of journals from poetry. And I was like, I'm not doing anything with that. And I'm still writing, not doing anything with it. So then I applied to a job back home in the DMV area, which I already knew had a poetry scene. I just never tapped into it. I never went out and actually tried. I was just like, okay, it's there if I need it. But then finally I came back with intention. And the second I moved back, I was hitting open mics. And that was where I met Crystal Lynn and Christina Gray, who are the two co-founders for DMV Renaissance Awards. We all met around the same time. We all actually started hitting open mics at the same time. It's kind of crazy. Our poetry anniversaries are all the same. But yeah, having a community, building that community myself, if I didn't see it, you kind of have to find your people, and you have to find the people who look like you, who sound like you, who also have a desire like you, and then put your heads together and realize I'm not alone. The second you realize you're not alone, Xiomara, when you were talking about it, you were saying how, other people, you made the group and other people came, because it's nice to know you're seen. You're not the only one. I thought it was only my box, but it's not. So that's how mine came about.
And to reflect on what both of you said, there's a need for it. Like Xiomara, you made that space and didn't even realize how badly people needed it, and now people are running to it because they needed that space. And that's why I'm so excited about this panel that we have right here, because people need to see more of this, especially in the current state that we're existing in. We need to see more of that art happening and more of that celebration of all of our cultures happening, because right now, if you turn on the television, it seems like a whole different world when there's so much beauty and diversity, regardless of what a certain electoral candidate thinks, among all of our cultures right now. There's so much diversity. There's so much beauty in all of our cultures. There's so much artistry in all of our work. So I love it. All right, let's keep going. We can go to either Sydney or Cheryl. Either one's fine with me.
I can jump in there. For me, so I am an immigrant from Guyana in South America. And for me, growing up as someone who wanted to do art, I just didn't really see anyone who looked like me. And it didn't really hit me how much that affected me until I got to college. I didn't really recognize how it affected the art that I was creating until I was in college. When I got there, I still didn't see a ton of people who looked like me, but I did see people who looked different. There was diversity in the people that I was seeing. I was seeing, different cultures and different people. But I think once I started seeing that, I was a little bit more encouraged to express myself in a different way. I think I held on to a lot of fear prior to that about what people would think of me through the art that I was creating. I think a lot of my art was very whitewashed. I didn't feel like I had the space to create art that highlighted Black and brown bodies and faces. And I think once I stepped into my role as an art therapist, I realized that this is really your time to highlight that art, because if not me, then how will my clients have the opportunity to be who they want to be and express themselves in the way that they want to in their art? And so I definitely try to be that person that I didn't have for them. I want to be that brown face and that person who's like, yes, you can, whatever you do in your art and what is culturally appropriate for you is okay. And it's welcomed here and encouraged.
Yeah, I love in your session before you talked about how it's like things don't have to be perfect and you have to be okay with not being in complete control of everything, but also open to trying new things. And I think that carries over as well into this conversation and into definitely, I'm sure you bring that up all the time in your work with the people you work with. All right, Sydney.
Well, phenomenal. This is just such a great panel with so many incredible stories that sound so similar in a certain sense. I hear, like you pointed out, Angela, that there was this need that first existed, and then everything was created around that. It was definitely very much the same for Aurora Tights. I know my personal story as a founder included being on a high school dance team that was predominantly white. And while that was, I would say, the top of my dance career, just because we were nationally ranked, we were doing a lot of, it was very much an athletic sport. I distinctly, I didn't always feel this way. It wasn't until I like that you said that, Sherelle, until a little bit of years later when I was sort of reflecting on it, that those spaces, while they weren't necessarily, like it wasn't overtly non-inclusive. It truly was. And I wasn't, me as a Black person was not ever thought of it first, or even that would be an intersection that was happening on the team, especially when it came to choices for hair, for makeup, for the costumes that we were wearing. I was just, my skin and my the way that my appearance was never really thought of, and it was just kind of fit into the greater team. And it wasn't until I got to college with a predominantly Black team, which was the first time, and that team had been predominantly Black too. It was such a complete shift. I finally had women around me who could teach me how to do my hair, who could teach me how to do my makeup, as well as give me that sort of constructive criticism that every artist needs, without coming from from a harmful place. And I just really recognized, I was able to reflect on that huge shift and what that did for my own personal identity, what that did for my own personal love of the art that I was in, because I loved it. I wouldn't have dedicated those many hours to it if it didn't build my character. But that shift was so special, it's so needed, and it really did fuel me in wanting to create those same spaces for those who interact with our brand, and to increase the diversity of the sport overall. Because when you see, it sounds like this is the same in every story that we've all said, when you see people who look like you, that just does something so different. It makes you feel like you can really do that, like you can really be all that that person is, and it gives you role models, and it's something to work towards. And so super important part of our mission at Aurora Tights because of that.
Yeah, well, and I think something you all touched on was kind of the surrounded by a white space, and not saying that there's something inherently bad about being around white people, obviously, because our this lovely event is being hosted by two white women. But when it's all you see, you don't necessarily learn that what you bring to the table is worthwhile and worthy too. And like I know growing to a predominantly white college as a voice major, I wanted to learn how to sing pop and jazz and that musical theater style, and I was only trained to sing in an operatic art song way. So now I have my students that want to learn that same way, and I feel like I can't bring everything that they need to the table, and I want them to feel like there's validity in the style that they want to sing. Like when we have talent shows and the kids sing what I don't program for them, I'm like, whoa, where were these performers hiding this whole time? Because it's stuff that speaks to them. And so I each year reflect how can I pull in more of what they're interested in learning and make it something that I can present as a group, so that way they don't feel like they're just learning one style that has nothing to do with them. So I bring that up to maybe ask what other, I guess, like barriers might have been in the way as you were developing your own artistic vision? Like what may have been something that got in the way with your development? Go for it, Chantel.
Okay, yeah, I'll speak on that because being a poet has such a cliche connotation to it, like especially if you are a Black poet. It is loved. Oh, so you're like Love Jones. Oh, have you gone to Busboys and Poets? And it's like, yeah, I've done all, I check the boxes. I can do a poem like that. I can write a poem like that. But the second you go under the surface, the second you do something that's outside of the box that people put you in creatively, it's like, whoa. Like I remember performing a poem about the village in Kenya, Umoja, and it's like a village of women about, they basically came together because they were running from genital mutilation. And I did a poem about that because I watched the documentary and I was so impacted by it. I'm like, this story needs to be somewhere else. Like we need to share this in poetry scenes as well. The second you speak about something that is uncomfortable for men, because I'm a very sensual poet. At first, I came out very sensual. I came out with that sort of brand, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of bounced out of that. And I'm like, let's get into the hard stuff. Let's get into the traumas. Let's get into and then everybody's, who is this? And like just redefining yourself over time can throw people off, but I think it's a big part of finding yourself as an artist. It's a big part, stepping out and doing things that just feel weird, even if it's to try it once and say, that didn't work and I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it felt. If you didn't like the way it felt, that's what matters. Not people didn't respond to it, because you create from a genuine place and you always want to, regardless of like the audience, you don't want to write for your audience because then it's no healing in that. There's no true expression. You aren't really being the vessel if you're only doing it for your audience, I think.
And there's no vulnerability in that. And that's
right.
like the biggest hurdle, I think, of doing quality performance is not being afraid to be vulnerable. So if you're constantly catering to your audience, you're never being vulnerable. You're just abiding by what you think they want.
Snap into that.
I'll take it. Does anyone want to chime in on that too? I don't want to cut you off.
I can chime in. I definitely agree that it's when you want to bring a story that's special to you or something that's special to your community or culture to the forefront. That's when people start to get super uncomfortable when it's not mainstream. And that definitely happened on my experiences, even on my predominantly Black dance team. Our coach was not was white, and she did not always, even though we were, how could I say this? Like, she didn't always like the music choices that we would want to bring to the forefront to dance to, when it came to football games, when it came to basketball games, to the point where a lot of the music choices that we had that were more, if it was a pop and if it was instead hip hop, it's like, no, like it's just a complete no, this is not the brand of the team, like things like that. And it's just, where you're getting at, and it was an affront to us because it's like not the brand of the team, the team, even though it's not like we're trying to overshadow anybody, but you can't use that excuse even more when you have a predominantly Black team too, where most of the people on the team, if not everybody, is behind these choices as well. And so I definitely think that it can be a barrier whenever you are trying to express yourself, not just as one part of your identity, but multiple parts of it. And I love what you just said, Rada Love, about there needing to be that vulnerability, there need to be that therapeutic side of the art that we do, because I think a lot of that was worry about what the audience would think instead of doing something that the full team would have loved to express.
Well, and I think one of those barriers can be the people who are like in charge, like the leaders in your artistic programs that are saying, this doesn't work for our audience. Like I know as a teacher, I've had administrators tell me, this style of music doesn't work, or we have right now in Maryland, we're trying to combat the Maryland state list of what kids can sing at the state choral festival, because it's so outdated and it's so limiting, and there's so much better music. And like I gave my kids a project this year and said, okay, I want you to go and find music, and I gave them a full week to search for music with my 7th and 8th graders, and they were like, so much of this stuff sucks. And I was like, do you see my dilemma? You're right, it does. And so the question becomes then, like, how do we get more people to write these things, or how can we find more composers that represent different styles, or how can I get my students to relate to something that was written years and years and years ago, but also respect their music too and help the audience relate to their music too.
So I love what everyone has said. We're just going to keep doing circles around each other. So to go along with the theme of vulnerability, I feel like for me, I have 2 challenges. The challenge as an artist, to be vulnerable in what I need to learn in order to practice my craft. And so personally, a big challenge was my gap in terms of my linguistic ability. It's not, my Spanish wasn't where I wanted it to be in order to feel most comfortable in these social settings, and where I needed to learn, because sometimes I could take advantage of going over to New York and learning about these practices, and there was Spanglish, and that I'm super comfortable with. But then sometimes I wanted to actually go to the island and learn from teachers who are practicing over there. And no one is better than the other. But in order to do that, I had to really kind of put myself in vulnerable situations where I said, I am not linguistically where I need to be, but in order for me to learn about the craft that I want to not only practice, but share with other people, I need to be uncomfortable. I need to be out there. I need to do what I can, because that's an opportunity that I'm missing out just because I'm scared. Like, that's not good enough. Like, I have an opportunity, I have to do that. And then on the other piece, what you guys were sharing about the challenge presenting your craft is you have to, especially when you're doing a practice that is less known or in a minority category, you have to educate all the time, all of the time. And so it is a responsibility, it is exhausting, it is a privilege, it is all of those things. And so I know I've been in situations where we've presented and, we might have to adjust and speak all in one language or all in another language, or mix it up so that we access different groups. We've had presentations where there have been people who don't understand what's happening, and so they come up and they might dance with me in a way that I am uncomfortable with, and I have to set boundaries and either take the opportunity, as teachers say, as a teachable moment, and share why we do things in certain ways, or to just set boundaries so that I feel safe. So that has been something, especially as, a woman in this culture who is taught to make things comfortable all the time for everyone. But at the same time, we as women who are trying to share an art form that is lesser known also have to push up against some stuff. So all of that.
Well, and also, with the being willing to break the mold situation, I feel like as women, as Black women, as Latino women, we are taught you must be a certain way, and we have so many themes and ideas already put against us of you're going to be this way, or you're going to be this way, or if you don't fit that very, very minute box that they want to put you in, they're like, oh, well, you're different, or I didn't know that there were people who look like you who were like you. So it's you have to be willing to break that mold, but there's a lot of pushback that comes with that the entire time too. So can we maybe speak on that for our younger artists? What were some things that you did, or how did you respond in those moments where you got that pushback? Like I know earlier, Greta Love, you mentioned the pushback from men when you started being truly open about the work that you wanted to speak on in your poetry. So how do you respond to that pushback?
So specifically when you mentioned like younger artists, especially young women artists, I think it's important for us to really get centered, because before you go out into the world and share yourself, I think it's important to do the digging within and to really like create kind of like an anchor for yourself. Like, this is who I am right now, even if it's who you are um August of 2020. This is who you are August of 2020. You can figure out who you are in September later, but just know who you are so that when you show up and when you get praise, or when you don't get praise, or when you get put in a box, you know who you are, so that it doesn't deter you from creating the way you truly want to. It doesn't deter you when your family may or may not support at certain points. Like, that'll be a big part of the journey, because this isn't a traditional thing to do. Like, yeah, I work a 9-to-5 too, but I also I consider low-key my 9-to-5 is like my investor into my career. But you just have to really get centered, and eventually you will have to reject what other people say, whether it's good or bad, because people will clap for you up and down when you're doing what's safe for them. I was just talking to my grandma about this, about how people can't manage you. The second you step outside of the box, they can't manage you, so they get uncomfortable, and they might put you down to hopefully put you back where they can manage you. And it's not about people managing you, it's about you knowing yourself and showing up as your full self. Yeah.
That deserves snaps. I feel like a lot of times, especially as artists and as women of color and as Black women, people try to manage you a lot. So being okay with the fact that you know who you are definitely helps with that pushback. And you might get called, sorry for my language, you might be called bitch. You might get called unmanageable. You might get called difficult to work with, but that's just their fear. That has nothing to do with you as an individual. Along with that, any other just challenges or things that you've had to deal with along the way that you've either been able to respond to or that you think developing artists should be aware of or wary of?
I think my work became the most gratifying when I decided to be just unapologetically myself, just not worried about the opinion of anyone or any, it didn't matter. I think like some people have said, like being comfortable in who you are, so much so that everyone else is forced to just be okay with it. Like, we're not giving you the room to tell me that I am not okay as I am. Like, this is who you get. And I think my advice for young artists would definitely be, in your artistry and just in yourself, is be comfortable, because everyone else, you need to be so comfortable that their uncomfortability doesn't matter. I know for myself, it was really hard to not change when people started to push back and started to be uncomfortable, especially when I was kind of breaking that mold of who I was as an artist previously. And I decided, like, this is actually not who I want to be. And now everyone else is kind of uncomfortable with who I decided I'm going to be. And it's just so important it was really important for me to be strong in that, in myself, because it started to look really good to going back to that old way of being, like, oh, you know what, they're not treating me the same way, and it might be easier to just be who everyone is kind of hoping for you, but it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel gratifying, it doesn't feel, I lost my sense of purpose in doing the work. And I think it's a really good thing to be able to share with my clients, is that, listen, whoever you decide you want to be is great. I'm not here to tell you otherwise. The only thing that matters is that is who you have determined that you want to be.
I love that. I love the idea that it's easier to like fall in line is absolutely true. And the understanding what it feels like, right? because if you tune into what it feels like, you feel out of alignment, you feel out of purpose, you feel like you're not having as much fun. So I would say to young artists, to young women, to anybody who wants to figure it out, like play with it, have fun with it. Don't commit. Like there's so many avenues and so many resources. The beautiful, one of the beautiful things about all of this chaos is that so many people are offering their resources electronically. And so you can tune into somebody's workshop. You can take that dance class that you've been meaning to go to. You can do that painting lesson, do whatever it is that you've been thinking about it, and be playful with it, because that's how you figure out what feels right, is only by trying it, only by doing it, and do it in a safe space for you, but do it.
No, I love that. Just do it. And I think that kind of ties into my next question about, as artists, we have to practice. And I know growing up, I was the most easily distracted practicer in the world. And it was because I could get away with it. I could get away with not having practice, but still being able to play or sing something better than the rest of my class. But that was just because I had a knack for it. But think how much better I could have gotten if I actually practice consistently. So like, how do you all develop your own practice, your own, maybe a routine, especially during quarantine where everything feels so unnatural? How do you develop a routine or a sense of practice consistently?
I can I can chime in. I think that my routine comes from how am I going to balance my 9 to 5 and my business as well as self-care. I loved what I forgot who said it, but I love when someone was saying that your 9 to 5 invests in your side business, because that's definitely how I think about things, and I make sure to allot my time in that way. So with that intentionality and making sure, all right, this is where the priority is lying, and here's where these are all still priorities. I try to organize my mornings, my afternoons, my evenings accordingly, so that I always start my day with some self-care. So I'm not starting it with hecticness, and then I move into my 9 to 5 for the late morning, early afternoon, and then the rest of the day is very much dedicated to Aurora tights. And I like to block it off in that way. I mean, it doesn't always work out right that way. Any routine is always not going to be perfect, but what I do like about it is that I know that there's space and time for that. So even if I do have to move some things around, I always make sure I dedicate space and time to those 3 things every day.
Yeah, I love the consistency along with the freedom to break the routine. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there needs to be some sort of plan ahead. Chantel, I think you were about to.
Yes, pretty much the same. I Please excuse the sound, but I honestly I cringed a little bit when you said consistency and routine. I said, what's that? Because to be honest, all of us have been shaken up this year, and it challenged. And it keeps coming back to me. I heard it once, and it keeps coming back because I'm slowly getting into it. But it's like, adjust your business model accordingly, because if anything else had changed in like a trend or something in the culture, you would have adjusted your model anyway. So I would say for me, I had to, because I work on multiple projects, I had to make priorities. I said, okay, I'm trying to work on 5 different projects in one day. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. Okay. So this week, my focus is to plan social media for DMV Renaissance Awards. And then maybe next week, I focus on creating a vision for my podcast. Like, just knowing you don't have to do it all in a day. And I think that put so much pressure on me. There was so much anxiety at one point where I just felt like I wasn't being productive when I was doing way more than my friends even anticipated I would do as an artist during COVID. They were just like, but you're doing so much. And that whole perfectionist mentality, like, I got to do everything. you know, I'm a boss, I got to do this. And in the midst of COVID, I also went through a breakup. So I'm like, why are you not giving yourself the grace as an artist? Create, do something for you. And I just, I would say in order to establish the routine, in order to get to that point, I had to reflect. So I would say, do you, but then always reflect on what you're doing and if it's really good for you. Because the self-care when you wake up is actually it. Like, you can't give to other people if you haven't given to yourself, because then you feel like you're dishonoring yourself and you take out that bitterness on other people. Well, I have. I'm gonna be transparent. Vulnerability. I will take it out on others if I don't give to myself first. So yeah, reflect and make changes accordingly.
For me, something that's really important in establishing that routine is definitely the flexibility and giving myself grace. Sometimes it's too hard. Sometimes you just can't do it. Sometimes you don't do things the way you want or need to do, and you just have to like be kind to yourself about it. And I used to try the route where I would beat up on myself, like this kind of tough love mentality, like maybe I'll motivate myself to do a certain thing, or, you know, fall into a certain habit, but it doesn't work, and it just makes you miserable. And so I think the thing that has been important for me is flexibility and just kindness. Like, offer yourself the compassion that you're probably really openly offering the people around you. And in my work, I think self-care is what keeps me going. If I don't take care of myself, I cannot show up, and I cannot hold those things that I need to for my clients. But at the same time, sometimes you come home at 10 o'clock and you just want to go to bed, and you just want to go to bed. And so I've had to learn how to be like, okay, gonna have to be a little bit more disciplined tomorrow, but not gonna beat up on myself about it today because it happened. We're gonna move on. We're gonna keep it rolling.
I agree. I don't have anything to add. Well, I used to be the person that would put something on the schedule, so that if you have something on the schedule, then you have to be held accountable. So you come up with something. And I don't know that I wouldn't be that person if it wasn't for this pandemic. But this pandemic has really made us learn the art, or at least practice the art of flowing. And so at this point, it gets done when it gets done, and I'm grateful when it gets done, and the self-care in the meanwhile.
I'd love to even just add, though, that in the very beginning of this pandemic, it was so odd to have that much time back. Like, I didn't know what to do. And it was because I was so on go before pandemic. And this was like, that was just the most severe pause I've ever done. And I was still very much a go through, like, in the very beginning of the pandemic too, just always on my computer. Like, that was the new way you were communicating with everybody. So it was just like always on. And then I truly burned out like a month in. And it was weird because it was like, wow, this is the most time I've ever had to myself. But it was because I always thought I had to be on. And after that, I took like a week off of everything and just got myself together. It was like, what truly matters and how do I want my day to look like? And I'm not gonna lie, like, it really did show me that this newer lifestyle of working from home has actually given like a lot of grace back to that self-care. Whenever we go back to the new normal, I know, like, I didn't do that before, but now it has got to be a part of it, and I'm not gonna be always on go anymore. It made this really truly made me realize like that was so unhealthy.
Well, yeah, and you're so like when you're passionate about what you're working on, it can become like all encompassing in your life. It's like I don't know about you, but I know I hyper focus on something. Like, I had my first student teacher last school year, and I said, sometimes I just don't eat lunch. Sometimes I just work right through it. And she was like, what do you mean you don't eat lunch? I was like, no, it's fine. You can eat. I'm not going to eat. I have stuff I have to do. And she was like, I don't this does not compute. And so just from having her in my room with me, I was like, we eat lunch. We take 30 minutes, we stop working, we eat lunch. Or I remember, like, I've worked with a nutritionist and with a therapist on eating disordered behavior. So for me, working on eating consistently and not feeling proud of being hungry, because I was like, I'm hungry. That means I worked all day. That means I did a great job. That means I didn't take any breaks. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm not eating all day, but you're telling me my blood sugar went up. You're telling me I'm starting to have high blood pressure. I weigh more than I've ever weighed in my life. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, well, I stopped sleeping. I wasn't eating consistently. I wasn't really exercising. Yeah, that'll do it. I'm trying to give myself a heart attack before I turn 30. So it's like learning that it's not taking a break and it's not being lazy. It's not failing at your goal. The taking care of yourself part helps you reach that goal, because if you're running on empty all the time, you're not going to be able to reach that goal. You might have thought you did, but really you were just putting yourself in an early grave.
I agree. And I would like to add, for me, trusting that you have created the space that you are hoping to create, and that the people, your people that you have brought together, will be there for you, whether or not you take that break, so that you can be ready for that. I think that's also something that we have learned in Cultura Plenera and Madre Tierra. We still have people who are reaching out to us and looking for those events. Why? Because, as we've all said, like, people were looking for those spaces. And I think that because we were, at a time, we were trying to create that space for ourselves. And so we were so scared that we wouldn't have it if we took a break, and trusting that your people are your people and your people will show up whenever you get back to it, and take that space to take care of yourself. All of that can happen at the same time.
And it models for other people how to stop and take a pause too, because we don't receive that messaging from anywhere that you need to take that break. So when you set the tone of like, no, we're going to rest now, you've trained other people to respect that too and say, no, we're going to rest now, or no, I'm going to respect and value my family time because that's what's best for me and my home. Then you can go, oh, maybe I should do that too. Maybe I should be sleeping too. So like when other people see you doing it, it doesn't feel so second, I want to say foreign, but that's not the right word I'm looking for. But I think you know what I mean. So it just becomes a more natural, progressive thing to actually take care of yourself. And I feel like that ties into the next question I was saying, was like, how can we create a space for ourselves? I feel like everything we've been talking about is how you make that space for yourself by making that routine and taking care of yourself. Is there anything you want to add on creating a space for yourself?
I would like to, yes. My coworkers for my 9-to-5, we have like seasons, maybe just like a certain season when it gets really busy. And I remember like seeing messages at like 11 p.m. or like getting text messages about work after. And, I've had to tell my coworkers, like, I don't work after hours like that. I don't. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I put in as much as I can until it's time to go, because I used to tell them even when we were there, I said, the second you tell somebody it's okay to email you, or a student, I work with high schoolers. So I'm like, the second I respond to an email on a Sunday, I'm going to be responding to emails every Sunday. And that's going to be the expectation. So even for them, I set that boundary. My coworker knows, one of my coworkers that I'm cool with, he knows not to call my personal phone about work stuff. I said, call the work phone. And I think creating that space means telling other people how to treat that space. If you need to close the door, hide out. If you just need a quiet session, put in some headphones, and like you said, showing other people. And one of my friends gave me this great practice. At night, before you go to bed, put your phone on airplane mode. And I had to learn my lesson and turn off the Wi-Fi too, because my mama made it through. My mom had called me on Google Duo, which is Wi-Fi. I said, of course, your mama knows how to get through to you regardless. It doesn't matter. But so turning your phone on airplane mode at night, radioactive frequencies and everything, that's cool to shut off too. But not turning it off until you're ready to give to the world, until you've given to yourself first. Don't turn it on and receive a notification until you're ready to. And when she said that, it hit me. And I was like, oh, it's that simple. That boundary is that simple. So yeah, I've started that lately.
No, I love that. My sister gives me grief because I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb at night, and I'm like, look, if it's an emergency, your phone call will get through. But you know, at 10 p.m., I'm not awake. You'll get my daily blast at 7 a.m. when I wake up, but don't expect anything from me past that. Don't start a conversation with me at 10 p.m. I'm done. Um, all right, so we're going to move the conversation on to the arts community as a whole and inclusivity in the arts community. So, this is kind of a two-part question. What are some changes you would like to see in the arts community, and what might you be, if you could ask for anything of either arts educators or any type of leaders in arts programs, what would you ask of them to make it more inclusive and more accessible? And that could be for women, that could be for people of color, that could be for people with disabilities, anything. How would you make it more inclusive and accessible?
I can start. I this is something that is so integral to our mission at Aurora Tights. I know we're like an apparel line, but our mission goes so much further than that. We have like a nonprofit part to our mission where we would love to see the retention rates and the rates of Black and Brown dancers within the skating and dance and other performance sports spaces just steadily increases. And one of the main ways that we know even from our own lives that a lot of people drop out and don't have a long tenure because there's a lot of kids in these sports very young, but there always comes this ceiling that they start to hit financially when it comes to staying within these arts, whether that be the lessons that they have to take, or the gear that they have to buy, and the consistency of all those two factors as well as travel. The years go on and as your career gets bigger. And so we are working with nonprofit partners on a consistent basis to funnel money from sales to those initiatives that they have. And I would love for our educators, for coaches, for those who have family members or friends within these sports to just be aware that that is something that does happen. And that's the reason why you sometimes don't see a lot of Black and Brown faces when it comes to the professional side of dance skating, because you might start in this space, but so many barriers start to come up when you move forward with that career. So yeah.
I definitely just want to echo the importance of making the materials required accessible. And I think that's something I hear a lot. A lot of people will say, like, I used to love painting and drawing when I was a kid, but it's expensive. And so it doesn't really feel like, when it comes down to it and people are budgeting, that doesn't really feel like the place they should be spending their money. And they receive judgment for spending their money on things like that as well. And I think, definitely for kids and adolescents especially going through really hard things, especially with times the way they are right now, it's important for them to have access to the materials they need so that they can express themselves. Because when they are not given the ability to express themselves appropriately and they bottle it up, it creates more problems, like more problems for them, more problems for their family. And as a whole, it bleeds into society. And so it's important for them to have accessibility to the things that can really allow for them to express their feelings and their needs and their wants.
I love that. Oh, sorry. You want to go? Oh, I think that definitely communication is a big piece on the superficial level of letting them know what is mandatory versus what is optional. That could be something that can bridge the gap for a lot of people. And then on maybe a deeper level of communicating to communities that might not be as easily accessible, because they're not coming to you does not mean that they don't want to come to you. I mean, they don't know about coming to you. So you know, that outreach piece, going out into the community and communicating who you are, what you do, and the potential for participating in your craft, and doing so in a way that speaks to that community, in a language that they can understand. And I'm saying that, you know, Spanish to English, or, you know, any language, or even English to English. There's often times where someone might come from a different community, and if you are not speaking in a way that is relevant or understandable to me, it's going to build a wall between us, where I'm not going to want or trust to send my child to you. So considering how you talk about your craft and how you bridge that gap for those kids is really important.
Yes. Yes. Like when y'all were talking, it just fell into me, because working with high schoolers, you see so much that I feel like children show us a reflection of society and culture and the things that are happening, and they are kind of, sometimes they mimic it. Like my nephew is 6. But even like seeing how he needs room to express and he needs a space. He doesn't even know. When I first told him, because we would paint together, and he would, I remember he was like, I can't be an artist. Like, and in his mind, he just, at 6 is already saying I can't be. And I was like, yes, you can. You can be whatever you want. He's like, I could be an artist. And I'm like, you can. And it's like, it's so exciting to have that opportunity. And like you all were speaking about exposure to opportunities, exposure to resources, having someone who speaks in a way that you understand is so important. Because my students, I didn't work directly for the county, so I couldn't create some type of club for them. But my office became like a therapy spot. Like we're sitting in there having real conversations, because their guidance counselor doesn't have the capacity, doesn't have the compassion sometimes to sit there and say, oh, you're struggling with your mental health, let's talk about it. And I'm like, if I take an hour out of my day to save a life, that's fine with me. That's fine. Corporate initiatives and goals, that does not matter. Like, people are what matters. And something I would like to see more, that I think I am seeing more of. I think as artists, we know how important mental health is, and not, we always, the kids are very important, and I think that we should work with the kids. But I think another part of it is dealing with the adults as well, because the adults have the kids. They go home to the kids. If the adults are not expressing and learning these coping mechanisms, then they can't be the example for the kids that we're trying to reach. The kids will just go home to, the same repetitive habits and stuff. So I'm gonna shout someone out.
Your conditioning.
Yes, exactly. Whiskey Girl does a lot of work. She's a poet in the DMV area. She does a lot of work on mental health, and even being transparent enough to say, y'all, I'm taking a break. I know I'm taking a break from being on y'all poetry stuff online and creating spaces like a Zoom room. We sat and just talked. Like, that feels so good to be an artist and to just sit and talk to someone who gets it. If we create that space for each other, we show each other that we can and we should express. Yeah.
I just have to, I have to echo that is so, so important. At Aurora Tights, we have live chats, and we had the opportunity, like IG live chats. We had the opportunity last weekend to invite an Olympian, Vanessa James, onto the live chat. She got to talk to my co-founder, Jasmine. And I have to tell the story because it's so resonated with what you were just saying about mental health, because Jasmine told me afterwards they got to talk about, I watched it, and they got to talk about performance anxiety, something so particular to artists, and how them as individual skaters, they didn't share that anxiety that they had growing up as children, and then as young adults, and then as adults. And in these sports, they didn't share that with anybody else. They thought that was how those spaces and how those things had to be. But that anxiety got to a point where when they were actually performing, they would land it when they were practicing. They would land their jumps, their turns, their everything. But when they were actually going out there to perform, they would mess up. And it was just this extreme anxiety that was it's not really talked about with silence, at least on the individual side. On the team side, which is where I primarily come from, we talk about that all the time. It's like we're all about to go out there to compete. We all know that that's there, but this is the first time that phenomenon was there, and then they were actually allowed a space to talk about that this was happening, and that this mental health piece, which is one of the reasons why Jasmine even dropped out of the sport when she did. Um, it was so it should have been talked about back then. And how do we create spaces that they are? So yeah, I think that mental health, especially for performers, and to truly show our art in the best way, the most, I don't know, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to show their art, but I think that mental health and focusing on that, especially for performers, especially for artists, is so important, for their craft too.
Well, and especially with younger artists. Sorry, Cheryl, did I cut? Were you about to type in?
I'll go after you.
Okay. I was going to say, especially I think with younger artists, because they are growing up in the time of everything being online and everything being documented, and then you watch just the spew of hatred that happens in so many of the comments. Like I see that even as young as like my fourth and fifth graders with my children's chorus kids, where I'm like, where did you learn to speak so hatefully about something as simple as how the class sat down and made a circle? What? How did that become a point of contention for you? So I think getting them to addressing the reality of like, yeah, there are going to be haters out there. No matter what field you go into, whether it's arts, sports, medicine, anything you go into, there are going to be people who are fighting against you. But we have to find a way to take care of you so that way you can go into that world and also hopefully not become one of those people who spews more hatred.
I think that there needs to be an emphasis on normalizing talking about mental health, especially in your artistry. And it's so important that so many people are doing their art because it helps them through whatever personal struggles it is they're dealing with. But that's so hush hush a lot of times. And I think there definitely needs to be some normalcy around, I'm here because this helps me with this thing that I'm struggling with. Also, it's okay that I'm struggling with this. And it's okay to express that in my art. It's okay to talk about the things that are hard. It's okay to talk about the things that are messy and not packaged really nicely for everyone else. I think there definitely needs to be an emphasis on addressing mental health within the arts and how it is just such a wonderful space to help cope. But I do think that there's often not enough energy put around talking about it and around the struggles and how hard it is and how it's harder for some folks than it is for others, and just allowing for that.
Greta Love, were you going to say something? Okay. I muted myself right as I thought I was unmuting myself. I think the work that you're doing, Sherelle, with helping victims of trauma, people who have overcome and survived trauma, that's so important because um, a lot of times when you're dealing with a survivor of any type of trauma, the first thing they have to learn is that they do have a voice and they have power again, because all of that power and all of their ability to speak up for themselves has been taken away. And so I think in the conversations that you have with your art therapy patients, I'm sure you're trying to help them regain their voice, understand that you can't control everything, but you can control how you react to things.
And we have that exact conversation really often. Like, we can't control anything but ourselves. And, so how are you going to now take the things that have happened to you? And the ball is in your court. Like, you literally have the opportunity now to continue to, project your trauma onto the people around you and make everyone else really sad and be in a lot of pain. Or you can deal with your stuff and you can move forward and allow to break those intergenerational curses, break the traumas, break those things that have been held in your community for so long. But you have to accept, you have to take that first step that you've got to deal with it and like dig through some rough stuff in order to do that. And it probably won't be easy.
Definitely like the unlearning part. And I think that's a world issue. Like that's not just a women's thing. That's not just a black and brown person's thing. That's a world thing. Unlearning the normalized behaviors and ideas and questioning whether they're rational beliefs or irrational beliefs, and are they going to actually help you move forward. Well, it is 5:05, and I am sad about that because I feel like I could talk to the four of you for hours. I really do. I've so enjoyed getting to hear everything you have to say. I'm so excited to like binge, read, and like stalk you all online. Sorry, no offense about stalking, but I'm very excited to just get to learn more about you and promote more of you, and hopefully get to work with you in the future. Before we go, though, is there anything that any of you would like to promote or talk about before we close out for tonight?
So, of course, I want to promote because, we got to let each other know where you can find us, what we got going on. But before I close, as we all navigate through life, I have this little quote that I keep with me. And I always say, take what you need, leave what you don't. And that includes every piece of art that you consume from me. Take what you need, leave what you don't, because things that don't belong to you, don't adopt them. That's it. But I will go ahead and promote my Instagram, of course. You can find me on Instagram at _GradaLove. Also, you can find the DMV Renaissance Awards on Instagram at DMV Renaissance Awards. We spelled everything correct. We had to make sure. And my podcast is titled Marrying the Unigod. For short, you can just go to mtunigod.com. And yeah, if you're into all the spiritual practices or just learning about what other people are doing and how we can be better about showing up spiritually, if you are spiritual, if you're not, no shade, like live your life. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and I hope to connect with y'all and see you again soon.
And if you have any specific links that you want us to put with the YouTube video for this, if you could type them into the chat so that way we make sure we send our audience in the right direction. Xiomara, you're up.
So Cultura Planera, which is the nonprofit that hosts the events with Bomba en Plena, and Madre Tierra, the women's group, is unfortunately like a physical group. So we're kind of taking a pause, but you can find us on Facebook. And maybe in 2021, we can all get together and do something really great. But in the spirit of artists, women, entrepreneurship, and self-care, the Well Work over in Columbia, Maryland, Laura Bacon is in charge of that. She's an amazing woman, and she's got an amazing collective of women who come together in order to support one another. And there are lots of wonderful self-care practices and supports there. So I highly encourage everyone to go directly there, sign up, and take a class of some sort. And thank you guys for inviting me. This was amazing.
I could say that if you want to learn more about Aurora Tights, please come visit us at auroratights.com. We are actually looking to raise money for our nonprofit partners and for 2 financial scholarships for a dancer and a skater through our Performing Color Showcase, which is happening August 17th at 7 p.m. So if you want to come out for a night of arts, dance, and skating primarily, then please come and support. Most of the money is going to our nonprofits, pretty much all of it. Actually, the rest is just going to the financial scholarships. And the last thing I'll say is that, yeah, I'm very excited that there's people like everybody who is involved in this out in the world. Participating in events like these really does give me so much joy, because it's like, you can sometimes feel like you're the only one. It's just very narcissistic thinking, but there's a lot of people doing great work for the communities that you can't touch or aren't thinking to touch. So super proud of everybody who's involved in this.